Have you ever felt like your worth depends on how well you're doing? Like if you're not accomplishing, producing, or performing, you're not somehow, or you are somehow less valuable? Well, that's wrong. And I've been there, and it's exhausting. But God never meant for your identity to be earned. He meant for it to be received. I recently heard a powerful truth from Chris Kuti, worship pastor at Lakepoint Church in Rockwall, Texas, and it's really stayed with me. If you only feel valuable when you are helpful, you're not being loved, you're being leveraged. Whoa. Kingdom leaders don't perform for belonging, they lead from belonging. Isn't that good? So that phrase hit me. It's easy to find our identity in what we do, how we sing, how we lead, how we build, how we serve. But when our value is anchored to performance, recognition, or results, it becomes fragile. Because what happens when the season changes? When the role shifts, when you lose your job, or you leave the team? And Chris really said it well when he said, identity tied to impact or performance will always be fragile. Identity rooted in Jesus remains steady in every season. Your role can shift, evolve, or end, but your worth does not move. And that truth mirrors the oldest story of lost identity, the first musician's fall. Lucifer was created in beauty, brilliance, and musical glory. Yet at some point, he looked at himself instead of his creator and said, I'm perfect because I'm perfect. And his focus shifted from the giver to the gift. And before his fall, Lucifer was a masterpiece of light and sound. Ezekiel 28 says, he was the seal of perfection, full of wisdom, perfect in beauty. Musical instruments, timbrels, and pipes were built in his very being. He didn't just make music, he was music. And his existence was designed to reflect the glory of God through beauty, brilliance, and sound. But over time, the reflection became self-focused. The song that once rose from him to God turned inward. Isaiah 14 reveals Lucifer began to exalt himself. I will ascend, I will exalt, I will be like the Most High, he said. And his identity shifted from worshiper to rival, from reflection to rebellion, and that's where worship either lives or dies. So when your identity is rooted in God, our gifts bring life and presence. But when it's rooted in self, even the most beautiful sound becomes hollow. Lucifer's fall reminds us that the moment we draw our identity from our gifts instead of our Creator, worship loses its purity. So true worship begins with identity, knowing we are created, loved, and designed to reflect God's glory, not our own. So that's where pride was born. The same thing can happen to us. We start out serving God out of love, but slowly, subtly, our sense of worth can become tangled in the doing rather than the being. We begin to look for validation from others rather than resting in the Father's voice that already says, you are my beloved child. I remember when I was much younger and what may have been one of the first time full-time itinerant worship ministries, I carried a deep compulsion to achieve. I wanted more invitations to minister, more recognition, more affirmation. And I constantly compared myself to other Integrity Hosanna music worship leaders. And without realizing it, I had tied my worth to achievement. And when others recorded more albums, received Grammy Awards, or earned songwriting royalties I could only dream of, jealousy began to grow in me. And that striving spirit nearly destroyed me and deeply affected those closest to me. So let this be a warning. Friends, your worth has never been based on your youthfulness. It's based on His unchanging love. Your position, your title, your platform, or your performance do not define you. That's not who you are. You are His, fully loved, completely known, eternally valued. So take a breath. Let God peel off every false layer of identity that ministry, culture, or comparison may have placed on you. and let him remind you who you are at your core. Slow down long enough to hear his voice whisper again, you're mine. I created you, and I chose you just as you are. You're wonderfully made, and you're my child. You don't have to achieve anything or add anything to who you are. That's what he said at your birth, and that's what he's saying now. When your identity is rooted in what God has spoken, not in what you've achieved, you can walk through every season with peace and strength, confident in who you are, knowing who you are. Your calling may change, but your worth never will. So I encourage you to ask the Lord, who am I in your eyes? And what am I worth to you? And the Lord will rebuild your identity from the inside out. So remember this. The scripture says, fear not, for I have redeemed you, and I've called you by name, and you're mine. Isaiah 43:1. I hope that encourages you, hope that blesses you, hope that helps you remember who you are in God. God bless.